Parshas Yisro, Vayishma Yisro Kohen Midian Chesed Moshe Es Kol Asher Asa Likim LaMoshe LYisrael Amoy Ki Haitzi Hashem Es Yisrael MiMitzrayim. Yisro, who was the Kohen Midian, who was the father-in-law of Moshe, heard everything that Elikim, which is the name of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Midas Hadin, did to Moshe, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu was punishing the Mitrim, and to Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim. Ki Haitzi Hashem, because that was the Rachmanis for Klal Yisrael to take them out of Mitzrayim, Es Yisrael MiMitzrayim. Okay, so I want to focus on Nakuda of who was Yisro, who was he? What was he all about? Where did he come from? What was his sugya, right? You know, Rashi says that he had 7 names, right? And he also had 7 daughters. And the word is that every time he had to marry off another daughter, he changed his name. You know how it goes with these type of zachen. Okay. Fine. So we'll start off with the Gemara Saita Daf Yod, Reb Chi bar Abba, Reb Simoi. Shloisha hoyu ba'isa eitza. There were 3 people that were involved in the eitza of Havan Eschak Maloi to get rid of Klal Yisrael when Klal Yisrael started booming in Mitzrayim. Right, this goes back to the beginning of Parshas Shmos. So the Gemara says, who were those 3 people? It was Bilam. We know who he is, or maybe we don't. But we'll get to him in a second. Right, Eiv. We definitely don't know who he is, and Yisro. Yisro, we know who he is. Yisro, we know who he is because we know who his children are. And that's really what matters over here. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit. Bilam sheyoatz nerag. Bilam had this eitzah to kill the Jews, so he got killed. Who killed him? Pinchas. Pinchas killed him at the end of the 40 years in the Midbar. He was killed. He was killed b'cherev. He was killed with a sword. Eiv sheshas agnidim b'yisurim. Eiv was quiet, so he got punished with Yisurim, and as we know from Sefer Eiv, as the Gemara goes through in Bava Basra, that, you know, the whole story of Eiv and his Yisurim. Now, here's Yisro. Yisro shabarach zachum ibnei bonav sheyeshvu b'lishkas hagazos. The Yisro, because he ran away, was zeicha that his grandchildren should sit in the lishkas hagazos, which is the Sanhedrin in the Beis Hamikdash. Shenemar mishpachei seifrim. It's a pasuk in Divrei Hayamim. The mishpacha of the seifrim yosh ve'yayvetz terasim shemasim suchasim hema hakinim haba machmas avirecha uksiv b'nei keni chaysim Moshe. So the pasuk in Divrei Hayamim says that there were a lot of Talmidei Chachamim and great scholars that came out haba machmas avirecha hema hakinim. They were from Keni, which was one of Yisro's names. And they came machmas, they came about because of b'nei Keni, of Avirechav, which was Yisro. Uksiv u'b'nei Keni chaysa Moshe. The Gemara goes weiter and says that b'nei Keni, who the children of Keni, who was the father-in-law of Moshe. So Bilam, let's talk about Bilam for a minute over here. So Bilam, we know. So it gets complicated if we want to pinpoint Bilam as being a regular person, as the Gemara talks in Sanhedrin, because the Gemara says in Sanhedrin with the Maisa when Bilam was killed by Pinchas at the end of the 40 years in the Midbar. So the Gemara says over there he was barely 35 years old, right? Now if he's in this Eitzah with Parai, right? So make the cheshbon. This was the beginning of make the cheshbon that they killed him at the end of the 40 years in the Midbar, right? Parai's Maisa was, you know, when Moshe Rabbeinu was born, right? So it's about 120 years before. I mean, Moshe Rabbeinu was 80 when he took Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim, but the Gzer of Havan Eschak Maloi was when Moshe was before Moshe was born. So it was at least 120 years before. So how could it be that he was only 35, right? So in my shurim on Chelik and Sanhedrin, we went through this and we spoke about this. That really, you know, the Gemara says that Lavan, right? It's not a Gemara. It's a Targum Yonason and Aram Yevid Avi. That's Lavan and Bilam. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was the same person, but they were all the same midah. It was all the same nusach. It was all going along the same lines. And that's that. And it just stam is a fascinating thing. Who kills Bilam? Pinchas. Who's Pinchas? Pinchas. The Gemara says that Rashi says beginning of Parshas Pinchas that the Shvatim didn't like him. Why didn't they like him? Because who is he? His grandfather was Mefatim Agolim L'Avodah Zarah. His grandfather fattened the cows that were shechten for Avodah Zarah, and here he goes to kill and see Yisrael. Who's his grandfather? Putiel. Who's Putiel? Shahoy mefatem agolim l'Avodah Zarah. That's Yisro. So Yisro's grandson, Pinchas, kills Bilam. So it's almost like a civil war between the the miyayitzim of Parai. Just keep that in mind because that's very interesting. That's very interesting ha'ara. Now, where does Eiv come in over here? Right, so Eiv everyone talks about the most because he's the most enigmatic figure in this whole picture, right? Eiv sheshosak nidim b'yisurim. Now, obviously, it's a davar pashut that the shtika was obviously like a shtika kahida. His shtika was very much that he was complacent with the fact that that they were making this gzer against Klal Yisrael. We're seeing it today all over the place. These nations that do care about the Israel or the Jews, they don't care about this. It's Elbazach, right? If you're quiet, vice versa, you're masking. Fine, but Reb Chaim Shmulevitz talks about it, and it really there's a kash over here, right? You think about it. Bilam lived a regular life, right? And at the end of the day, he got killed. But like Lamaisa, he was a regular guy. He had terrible Yisroim, right? The Gemara goes through it, the Psukim go through it. He had terrible Yisroim. What it looks like is that Eiv had a much more difficult time than Bilam. So how could it be? Bilam is the Iker Reitzach. Bilam is the one that says to kill them. Eiv is just quiet. So like Eiv gets so klapped, and Bilam like, oh no, he's all right. He just gets killed. Why is that worse? Eiv has a bigger einish than that, right? So Reb Chaim Shmulevitz has a big mimer on this, and he explains that I don't want to get into it because it's not the point over here, but the nakuda is that he says like this. He says that Bilam was nerag, he was killed, he is no more. Eiv was still alive. You have to be machshav the chaim that you have. The gift of life is so much greater than if a person is living in a matzav of Yisurim, the thing that can take him, that can push him above and rise up above all the Yisurim, is the fact that he's still alive. And he brings a pasuk in Tehillim. The pasuk says, "Yasar Yisrani Kav Lamavis Leinasanani." Hashem gave me Yisurim, but He didn't give me death, right? Because Kolzman I'm still alive, even if I have Yisurim, I'm still way, way better than all the people that are dead, right? And he brings the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, that says Yafesha Achas B'Tshuva Masav Tevim Ba'olam Hazeh Mikol Chayil Maba, that it's better 1 minute, 1 moment of Tshuva and Masav Tevim in this world from all of Chayil Maba, because once a person's in Olam Haba, he can't change anything anymore. It's finished, right? Even the Malachim, right? But even the Malachim, they're on their Madrega, but we say, we have a different avodah that we can still steig higher than the Malachim have. It's very interesting nekuda. Just want to just manage the kitzer, just a couple of nekudas. What's pshat in this whole Maisa with Yisro? Why do you say not to kill the Jews? He was as a tzaddik. He was as a rachamon. Like, what was the pshat, right? So I don't think he was such a rachamon. I don't think that's the pshat. I think that the pshat is that he was a very straight person. He was very straight. And there was no monkey business. And he said, "You're going to wipe out a whole nation. You can do such a thing. It's a terrible thing, just like Yashrus, right? There's a difference between a tzaddik, and Yashrus, right? Here's really the chiluk. This is what I want to mention. This is what I want to talk about. It's very pashut's idea. The mitzvah of kibbud of aim, for example. All right, it's grad in this week's parsha. It's one of the Aseret Dibros, right? Could a guy understand the concept of honoring parents? 100%, right? It's not one of the Shevim B'nai Noach, right? But a guy understands it because it's something that makes sense, right? What's a pshat? I always say this word that Dama ben Asina, right? See, he excelled in the mitzvah of kibbud av. Why? What happened? Because his father had a certain stone that the Chachamim wanted it to put in the Choshen or the Ephod, depends which Girsa or which Gemara. And they came to him, and he said, my father's sleeping on his keys, or he's sleeping on the box, and I can't wake him up. And, b'schus that, he had a paraduma. So the Maral and others point out, that's very interesting. What mitzvah did he do? He did kibbud of aim. Every guy could understand kibbud of aim. What was his schar? His schar was paraduma. You understand paraduma? No one understands paraduma. So it's the exact opposite of what his schar was, right? But it was be'etzem and midah keneged midah. Why? Because the way Yidden do mitzvahs, right? Here's the aside. The way Yidden do mitzvahs is not because it makes sense. It's not because it makes us feel good. It's not because we think it's right. It's not because this is what my Rebbe said I should do. We do because this is what Hashem told us to do, and this is what Hashem wants from us. We do it because it's Ratan Hashem. We do kibbud avayim not because I'm a nice guy. We don't do mitzvahs because it's a nice thing. We don't do mitzvahs because I'm a nice guy and I want to be nice to my parents. The chiyuv is to be nice to your parents, but the reason why we're doing it is because that's what HaKadosh Baruch Hu told us. Maybe HaKadosh Baruch Hu put it into the teva that this is the way we should be. Fine, right? Just quickly kuda back to Dan Ben Nesina for a second. He said, I understand. A guy comes when your father's taking a rest in the middle of the day. A guy knocks on the door, right? And he's like, "Listen, within the next hour, your father told you don't wake him up for a half hour. This guy says you have 15 minutes. If you invest in this, you're guaranteed $1 million by the end of the year." The kibbud of aim is to wake him up because you want him to be matzliach. Right. What kind of greater zchus of kibbud av is to give the father tons, such a tremendous amount of money? So Moshe finds in Divros Moshe in Kedushin says a great vart. The Gemara there in Kedushin where it talks about kibbud avayim, where it talks about Tam ben Nesina, it says a Maisa that he was sitting there with the Gedolei Raimi, he was sitting there with all the noblemen of Rome, and his mother was a crazy person, and she came in, she took off her shoes, started hitting him, ripped his clothing, spit in his face, and he didn't respond. That was the respect that he has for his mother. So Moshe says there's a Gevaldige Shidduch. She was the Isha Shaita, he was a Shaita. They were both crazy. So it was a Gevaldige Shidduch. Yeah. So he would have got mad to lose. His sleep. He was more machshav of his sleep than to be machshav of all that money that the Chacham were willing to offer him. Some of this is interesting to the point. There's nothing Gemara Kedushin I want to say over about. I want to say over about kibbud avayim, right? So the Goyim said when they heard HaKadosh Baruch Hu Anochi Hashem Lekecha, they said lechved atzmai hu dairish. He's asking for himself. It's all about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Gradson to Sant, I have a shtickle ha'ar on it, but the Medrash says that why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu start with Anochi? Right? Because Anochi sounded like some kind of Egyptian language that they were used to. So Hashem spoke with Anochi to talk their language to understand. Right? The Medrash says Leishinu L'Shainam. Right? One of the things that they didn't change in Mitzrayim was Leishinu L'Shainam. Right? They didn't change the language; they spoke the Yiddish language. Yeah, but maybe it was the dialect, maybe it was the accent. I don't know. I don't know, but. I'll go upon the Gemara Darshan is a lot of things about Anochi, right? That Anochi is that the Torah was written by HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm not nafshi ksavis yahavis. I was the one that wrote the Torah and gave it to Klal Yisrael, right? But that's that. Oh, so he said l'chved atzma hu dairish, right? And l'yilacha, don't be able to desire. It's all about HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's like the guy are like, I just can't riot to anything, right? L'sisa weiter, it's all about Hashem, right? But once they came to Kabir Savicha Vesyamecha, they said, now it's not all about himself. It's all about, it's not all about respecting him, it's about respecting parents also. So the Gemara takes us to be madgish the chshivas of what kibbud avayim is about, right? And it's very interesting because we know that's this famous raid, but we know that the first 5 dibros are ben adam lamakim, and the next 5 are ben adam lachaveri. Kibbud avayim is on the bottom of the ben adam lamakim. There's shleish shutzim ba'adam, right? There's the mother and the father and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? The father gives the. I don't remember which one gives the lev and which one gives the adam, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives in the neshama, right? So it's a fascinating thing that people. People are busy with this with all kinds of mahalchim, but it's that. How do you view HaKadosh Baruch Hu? I mean, what's the emunah? What's the emunah that our emunah that we vision what HaKadosh Baruch Hu is about? It's very much how we vision authority, right? What's our relationship with the authorities in our life growing up as children, right? So if it's a big boogie, many times it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes across to us. We think about HaKadosh Baruch Hu as this big boogeyman because that's what the authority was in our lives, right? So, I was telling this to my grandfather told this to me because I told him a very interesting thing. There's a person that works with kids at risk, and he says that before he even meets with the kid, he always asks the parents, "What's the shalom bayis situation?" So if there's good shalom bayis, then the kids will be all right. Generally, right? It's not. But many times, the reason why the kids are falling out is because the shalom bayis is falling out, right? But very interesting to Zach, which I want to get to also, is I'm going to get to in a second. Moshe starts telling Yisro all the ma'aslach that happened, yeah. And the Yichad Yisrael kol ha'tova she'as Hashem l'Yisrael asher tzilum yad Mitzrayim. I'm sorry, pasuk before that, pasuk ches. Moshe told his shver everything that Hashem did to Par Mitzrayim, like this Yisrael, that he saved Klal Yisrael. What do you mean? Why does Moshe have to tell him that? But Yishma Yisro. What did Yisro come in here? He heard about Amalek. He heard about Yitzhak Mitzrayim. So what's the pshat, right? So it's almost like you hear a rumor, right? Pliny got engaged, right? Oh, really? Yeah. I don't know. It's rumor. It's like it's tumbling. It's tumbling. You don't have the vados. Yisro get hurt. He wasn't mamish 100% maimin that this was that it happened. Once Moshe Rabbeinu said, Tasidas, this is what happened, she says, okay, fine. Now I believe you. Right. Okay, it's a shver taken from the Edom. I guess trusted Edom very well, yeah. It's great. I saw interesting that I saw Ha'ara Be'alma that Bilam was Lavan, right? So that's Shtein Chazal. He was Yaakov Avinu's shver, right? According to one Gemara, Eiv, Dinah married Eiv, right? That's what it says in the Gemara. So Yaakov was Eiv's shver, and Yisro was Yisro was Moshe's shver. Everyone here, all these three people, it was a shver avoida. It was all the shvers getting together, right? You don't want anyone's shvers and shigas plotting against anybody. But it's very interesting. I don't know what to do with that, but that's just that's interesting of art. So back to the original child that we're handling. So why is Yisro doing this, right? So the Pasha says that Yisro is doing this because there's a certain din, there's certain yashros, there's certain laws, right? One of the assignments of Bnei Noach is to have dinim, right? To wipe out a whole nation. It goes against having dinim. So Yisro stuck up for that, right? But weiter, what's interesting is that I saw someone tying it like this, that a ben noach is also big zela also, and if you force someone into avdos and you force them and you tie them up and you beat them up like Mitzrayim did to the Yidden, they were over on like Gainiv Nefesh, right? Which would be very interesting because the whole goal of Mitzrayim was a kapara for Mechiras Yosef, which is Gainiv Ishu Mecharai, and that's really why because they sold Yosef, and they sold him as a slave, so that's why we were slaves. I mean, that's partial cher. So what does Yisro do? Why is the parsha called Yisro? What was Yisro's whole vart? Right. So I always say this over that everyone's shver gives them great eitzes. Everyone's shver tells them, do it this way. Maybe you should do it that way. Yeah. But how many shvers actually tell them a mahalach how to fix the problem? The Moshe Shver gave him a mahalach how to fix the problem, right? He didn't like the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu was standing from morning till night answering all the shilos. He says, take it easy. He wanted his Edom to have it easier. So he made a whole judicial system. Weiter, Yisro is busy with making judicial systems, right? And he made a system that worked out for the small, the Sari Meos and Sari Alofim and Sari Asarais and all these different types of all different levels of things. The great things, the difficult problems will be brought to Moshe Rabbeinu. He's weiter going with Yashras. He's weiter going with Dinim. This is weiter. This still doesn't mean that he's doing it because what Hashem wants. He's doing this because this was his plan. This was his eitzah. He was a practical guy. You see, he's practical because even in Mitzrayim, he's telling Parah. He ran away. He ran away because he couldn't be there with such corruption. So he ran away from that. That's the pashtus, right? But then the problem is like this. Before we get to the problem, I just want to speak at Ha'ara. The Medrash says that Amalek was also involved in that eitzah. So think about it. Yisro, Mashmua Shama Uba, Muchemes Amalek, right? So he knows Amalek from before also, right? But it stayed in Chazal, Bilam and Balak, yeah, together spell out Amalek. So really, Bilam and Amalek, they're very, very eingebunden. They're very, very close friends. They're business partners. So it makes a lot of sense. Bilam, Para, all the nasties are all working together. So it's all good. Yeah? But we have a problem. Why? What's the problem? The problem is that the Gemara Sanhedrin and Daf Kuf Dalet says, Gedola legima shemekareves eserechaykim, that legima, giving to eat, giving to drink, is great because mekareves eserechaykim. It brings the ones that are distant, brings them close. Hey, you makarv somebody, right? We know from Avinu, right? You makarv him, and you bring him tachas kanfei shechina through food. You bring him to Shabbos with the mitzvah and it's gishmak. He gets involved, right? But the Gemara learned it out from Yisro, and the Gemara says b'schus that his children sat in the lishkas hagazis. The same way that the Gemara says in Saita that because he ran away from the corruption of Paroi, his children were zeichet to sit in the lishkas hagazis. Here the Gemara says they were zeichet to sit in the lishkas hagazis because of the Gedela Legima. So what's a pshat? Legima lechayra. I'll be pashtus. It's like this. Yeah, I'm not making a big mimer over here. I want to just give a simple, straightforward answer based on what we were talking about before. Legima is the pshat, a certain varmkeit, right? I want to get to know you. I want you to feel comfortable. I want you to feel at home. I want you to feel good, right? The highest level of Achnos Asarchim is Shabina Rav said, somebody. I don't know if it was a Ma'aser that Shabina Rav said it, but the Shabina Rav basically said that what level is the guy? What's the highest level of Achnas Asarchim? Well, the guy's comfortable enough to make himself a coffee in your own house. To put, to take something from the fridge, to take something from the cabinet by himself. Because then he mamish feels like he's at home. Then you're doing the guy real taiva. If he always feels like you're a nervous host, whatever, it's not like a shmag, right? L'chayra, this is one of the midas of Klal Yisrael, that they're goyim lechasadim. Yisro is not a yid. He came to be Megayer because of what he heard. He was very fascinated by the nisim, or he was very fascinated by how the Melchamas HaMolek played out, right? But we're talking about this guy, this person that's coming with a certain yashrus and a certain mishpat and a certain din and a certain seriousness about din, that he couldn't stand for corruption. Standing for corruption is not necessarily Yiddish zach. There's corruption in the world and the people that don't like it. You turn on the radio, you'll hear this one talking about that politician is corrupt, and that politician. Everything's about corruption. It's not a Yiddish zach per se to be anti-corruption. So what's this with Yisro, right? But once it gets to the point where he's doing Gemilas Chasadim, so then his children are sitting in the Lishkas HaGazis. It's a very different type of yeshiva in the Lishkas HaGazis. They're being zeiche to Torah and Gedula and Sanhedrin because they're going to with Yiddish midas. They're not just doing the right thing. Yiddishkeit is not about doing the right thing. It's about doing something for Yena, and it's doing the Ratzon Hashem. So it's very interesting because what's the Sanhedrin? The whole point of the Sanhedrin is to shtel avek dinim, to shtel avek halachas, to shtel avek Torah and Klal Yisrael. The Gemara says in Bava Basra in the beginning that Kimitziyin takes a Torah Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, that's referring to the Sanhedrin. So the Torah, the Ikar Torah that comes out of the Beis HaMikdash, right, which is the Malkum of Ashras HaShechina, the Spitz Torah that comes out of the Malkum Ashras HaShechina of Kimitziyin takes a Torah Dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, that's coming from the Lishkas HaKazas, that's coming from the Sanhedrin. He could only be Zaycha to that once he's a rangaton in the midas of the Yidden. By just doing the right thing, that's not the midas from the Yidden. There are people that think straight. It's avad, it's a maila, but that's not a Yiddish maila per se. That's not what the Torah is about. The Torah is about Gemilas Chasadim. The Torah is about other things. Now here's where things maybe get a little interesting, because the Gemara says in Brachas. Let's see the psukim inside. Vayikach Yisro, pasuk Yud Beis. Vayikach Yisro chaysa Moshe oilo zvachim leilikim. Yisro went and he was makar v'oilo and shlamim. Vayavay Aaron v'chol ziknei Yisrael lecha lechem chaysa Moshe l'fnei leilikim. And Aaron and all the ziknei Yisrael went to eat bread together with Yisro chaysa Moshe l'fnei leilikim. U'Moshe heichen halach. Where was Moshe in this whole business? V'alei hu shiyata l'krasei. Right, he's the one that originally went out to him. V'garam le'as kol ha'kavod. See, this is the famous Chazal that Yisro wasn't able to come into the Anani HaKavod, right? So he was locked out. So someone sent him a message that your shver is outside. So he goes to greet him. Moshe goes, so then Aaron goes, so then this Canaan goes, and the whole Klal Yisrael goes to go meet Yisro, right? So that's where Moshe was, yeah? And so that's why it says Vayavai Aaron. As they Zok Rashi. And Zok Rashi is right there, Lifnei Elikim. What's Lifnei Elikim mean? Because what does it mean that they sat and they ate bread in Mechayse Moshe Lifnei Elikim? Vus epis that they're eating bread Lifnei Elikim. Zok Rashi, Mikan Shahanene Mesuda Shetalmidei Chachamim Mesubim Ba Ki'ilu Nene Mizav HaShechina. That when a person is nana, that somebody who's nana, who takes part in the Suda, that Talmidei Chachamim are eating by, it's as if he's being nana Mizav HaShechina. Because the mahalach of how a Talmid Chacham is Isaac in being Maila the Gashmis into Ruchnis by eating this bread, through the brachas and through taking in the koiches that the food is going to give him to be able to be Oved Hashem, and that he's still focused on HaKadosh Baruch Hu even while he's being involved in Yom Gashmiim, that's also Ki'ilu enemies of Hashchina. This may be a little bit of a wacky word, but the difference between, you see, the goyim, let's back it up a step. A goy could be makar v'oila, a goy cannot be makar v'shlamim. Why not? It's pashut. Because a goy understands the musig of holiness. But the musig of holiness that a goy understands is very much related to the world of precious, disconnecting. This guy, he's, Rabbi Miller used to say about a certain saint, he sat in the same place for 40 years, didn't move, he didn't move. He was meditating in Chayzvos. So Rabbi Miller said, imagine what it smelled like, right? It's gefährlich. They're very busy with precious. Like, they don't have children, they fast a lot, and all kinds of disconnecting for Olam Hazeh. Yiddishkeit is punkt verkehrt. It's we take everything in Gashmis and we mile it into Ruchnis. That's what Kedusha is. Kedusha doesn't mean, and everything about the Yidden is a Kedusha. The Metzius of Kedusha Yisrael is that there is not one part of the Gashmistic world that we can't be milet into Ruchnis. This is the Halach and Shulchan Aruch. That a person, if he needs to take time out from his learning, to sit and schmooze with people, to socialize, to relax his mind, or to eat, or to take a nap, or to do a physical thing, to engage in a physical activity, kidei that he should have koyach, to be Isaac B'Torah better, or to be Isaac and Avodas Hashem better, then that's what he has to do. But and not only, and it's not even considered that he's wasting time because he's using that as a koyach to push him towards Avodas Hashem. So then that's also chelik of the Avodas Hashem. And that's what Kedusha is. Kedusha is that I'm taking a nap that I should have koyach to learn. Kedusha is that I'm eating so I should have koyach to daven. Right? I'm not going to get involved if they allowed to eat before daven. I'll let it for that. You're not. but that's the mitzvah. Right? So I want to say, Vildazach, that Yisro, again, he's coming from seriousness of Mishpat. In Mitzrayim, he couldn't be sovel the krumkeit of the mishpat that was going to happen if he was going to throw the Yidden into the water. It's good that he wasn't on that team because then his daughter wouldn't have gotten married, right? Because and then weiter he comes to Moshe Rabbeinu and he tells him how to set up a whole judicial system. But what's this? He's makar v'oila and then he's makar v'shlamim, because the shlamim is kedusha. The kedusha sa'achila of Talmidei Chacham, like Rashi says, that's why he's makar v'shlamim, because now he's entering into Kedushas Yisrael. So he's meeting with Moshe Rabbeinu and Gans Klal Yisrael, he's being makar v'shlamim. Once he's makar v'shlamim, now it's shaykh for him to be involved in the world of Gedela Legima. This is where he's entering into the Ananei HaKavod, this is where he's entering into Klal Yisrael, and he's becoming one of us. Hey, can you imagine Moshe Rabbeinu Shveri? He's not even one of us. Yeah? It's a Mod Mazar. Obviously, it needs to be understood better than the way we're explaining it now. But Al Kapanim, that's where he's nichnas til Teich Kedushas Yisrael. From this pasuk, he brought an oila, but an oila, a guy could bring an oila because it's holy, right? The whole thing gets sacrificed. The fact that you can be makar of a carbon and you can eat from it and get a kapara through the eating, that the goyim can't be matzik, that the goyim can't work with, right? Not only that, but Shteiter and Pchaim Velozhiner, that just like the mun, there was no psailus in the achila, the karbanos also there's no psailus in the achila. And he goes weiter and he says that when a person eats b'kedusha the way he should, there's no psailus in that also. So it's such a foreign concept to a guy. Because everything of a goy is about psilas. The goy's be'etzim psilas. But it's not about that the goy's being psilas, is that he can't wrap his head around of taking a gashmis de gazak, being milet into ruchnias. Everyone understands dinam and mishpat. It's pashut. Everything understands dinam and mishpat. It reminds me of the beginning of Parshas Mishpatim, right? Because the end of Parshas Yisro talks about, don't go up on steps on the mizbech, you should make a ramp. And then the next thing is Ve'ela Mishpatim, right? So what's the pshat? What's the smichas of the Parshas? Rashi brings from Chazal that we should always have the bezdin etzel mizbeach, right? That's what we're talking about. That's what we mentioned before, that the Sanhedrin is in the Beis Hamikdash, right? So Maral is mazber, interessant zach. And it shows so nicely to a couple of things that we said before also. The Maral is mazber like this. He says, what's a mizbeach? You're makriv a carbon on the mizbeach. You create kirvas elikim. Carbon is lashon of kiruv. You create a kirvas elikim when you're bringing the carbon on the mizbeach. Because really, it should be you. So, that behemoth that's there instead of you, you're being makriv that, you're offering that to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So that's like you're being makriv yourself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Right? What does Bezdin do? What's the job of Bezdin? Right? Not to adjudicate the laws. Right? That's how you could look at it in a very balabatish way. That's the Yisro way of thinking before Yisro was nichnas l'teichadrush as Yisrael. But the concept of Bezdin is to make shalom bein adam lachaveroi, bein ish leishtai. That's the concept of what Bezdin is. Bezdin is about making shalom. The same way, this is what Maral says, the same way the Mizbeach creates a closer connection between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so too does a Bezdin, supposed to, make shalom between ben and lachaveroi. And that's really where it's at. And there's a whole bunch of other zachen about this, a whole bunch of other gemaras that say this, that kol enemy sudish Talmid Chacham shari b'seicha. But the point is that when Talmid Chacham eats, and his whole eating is l'shem Torah and l'shem kedusha, it's like a mizbeach mamish. So then, even though it's a gashmistig meal, but because the Talmid Chacham is shari b'seicha, he's sitting within that, it becomes a ishay reich nechayach l'Hashem. And even though it's a very physical thing, yeah, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, you have three people that eat by one table. They say divrei Torah by the table. It's as if they're eating from the mizbeach. Yeah, I want to take it a step weiter, because the Gemara says that the pasuk starts off talking about the shulchan and talking about the mizbeach. Bisman that you have the mizbeach, so the mizbeach is mechaper. Ve'achshav shulchan ishlo the mechaper olav. Where do you get a kapara from? Your shulchan. What's the shulchan? By having guests over. They state in the Gemara that it's Gemara at the beginning of the 9th parak in Brachos and Dafnun Hey. That the pshat is that if you have a guest by your table, right? Or if the three things over there in the Gemara. One of them is that the person who always has his suda available if anyone would come and knock on the door. Shouldn't make him feel like he's making something special for him. Oh, I'm about to start the meal already anyways. Right? So that's L'fnei Hashem. Even though you're doing it for another person, but that's the highest madrega of L'fnei Hashem. And you get a kapar for that. Right? So that's and that's why it's kilun enemies of Eshchina. Because Hashem Yisbarach mefarnes oisam me'atzmei mikvaydai, to give the person what he needs for the Suda. Ki magia Suda zois adzav Hashchina, ki zehu haparnasa min Hashchina. As I state to Maral. On Pirkei Avos on the Mishnah, because he's mekadosh the gashmis to the point where he's going to be mild the whole thing until he's mamish the veshchina, right? So it's not about following the rules; it's about being mekadosh things. It's about being mekadosh things. Obviously, in a bezdin, when you're handling a shaila and you have a shach and you have a kimli and the kunshas fekis and a k'tzais and a thing and the back and forth, and it's all Torah, and we're taka sitting trying to adjudicate and figure out the laws, right? But it's not about okay, this is the pshat by. The pshat is that now we were zeichet to be mekarev to levavos again. That's gedolah legima shemekarev says halavavos, shemekarev says orechek, and we learned it out dafka from Yisro. Because if we learned it from somebody else, they're used to it already. Yisro is coming from a completely different world, right? It's very similar to Avram Avinu. Yisro in a certain oifen is very similar to Avram Avinu in this way. Avram was this big intellectual. He discovered HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but yet his midah is Ava. right? Which we spoke about back in the day. All right, we'll stop here, and that's that.